nation. When it came to Eretz Yisrael and the Jewish people and Am Yisrael, which governs everything else, which is sort of beyond the planetary influence, but governs the planetary influence, he couldn't understand unless he was in it. Okay, but anyway, we see from here that each one of these things, each thing in this world, each nation is governed by a certain constellar force, and then that itself is governed by a certain ministering angel, one of the 70 sarim, they're called, like the ministering angels. And though they themselves, mikablim mishamrei ofanim, those ministering angels themselves receive from, so to speak, the waste product of the angels, which are called ofanim, which means wheels, and they're the lowest of the angels. So in other words, he's trying to explain to you, you're sitting here worrying about your bills, and it's killing you, and suddenly it's time for mincha. Right? So you go into mincha, and you stop for a second with the bills in the world, and you start thinking for a second, you're like, wait a second, let me just put this picture together. So you're telling me that nothing here is happening unless there's a thing on top of that, and a thing on top of that, and a thing on top of that, and everything is being governed from above. Here I'm drowning in these affairs, but in reality, it's just like a trickle down of Hashem's influence through different channels dealing with me. It's all Hashem, basically, is what you're coming out to. Even the ministering angels, which are these huge governing forces of all reality, they're only receiving their life force from the waste product. What does it mean, the waste product? Why does it call it the waste? Shamrei ofanim? Because the indication there, again, we're in a meditation. We sort of stop the Mayim. We're talking about what you're thinking when you're davening. The Alter Rebbe works like this. A lot of times you'll be in a Mayim where he's explaining to you what Noah's Ark is, and you're getting, and he's like, and then you're going to start davening. He's like, wait a second, you're going to start davening, and he starts going into a long thing about, it's almost like he got stuck, mentioned the word davening, and he has to explain to you for a second what's going on in your thoughts for a second. So he's saying that, what does it mean, shamrei ofanim, the waste products of the ofanim. The ofanim is a certain level of angel. There's angel upon angel. But the waste product means that just like a waste of a creature is after you take in the full nutrients of the food, so the good things and the things which enliven your body, you keep for yourself, and what's totally unnecessary and actually could harm your being if it stays in your body because it's so low and coarse, and compared to it's what you've refined from the life force, which is not fit for a life force for you. That's what comes out of the other end, and this is nevertheless the life force which enlivens all of the 70 ministering angels. It just comes from the waste product of the lowest level of angels. And that waste product from the lowest level of angels is the spiritual force which sets the entire universe in motion, which then gives and feeds, so to speak, the details of planet Earth down here. You're just trying to open your eyes for a second. What's going on out there? Vehem mekablim ha'malachim, and those ofanim, those lowest angels themselves receive from higher angels. If you go look in the Rambam, he explains there's 10 levels of angels. The gavoa ma'al gavoa, and it goes higher and upon higher. Ad, how does it go? Shekulam mekablim mechinas malchuso yisbarich. All of them are receiving, and when you say all of them, you just go from each one receives from the lowest part of the higher one and so forth. They all receive from the sphere of Malchus of Hashem, Malchus of Atzilus. And that's what we say in davening. Your Malchus, in other words, the Malchus of Atzilus, at the end of the day, is really the Malchus of all the worlds. Everything at the end of the day receives its life force from there. This is what we said yesterday in Tanya also. There's a nitzutz, even from Malchus. It's not like they're getting Malchus, they're getting a spark that comes out of Malchus, which then descends and descends and descends and descends and transforms itself into different vessels until finally it actually materializes after a whole long journey as your bills being paid, as Mayim Rabbi, like this inundation of reality. And this is Shemahaves Kola Olamos. It enlivens all the worlds, Me'ayin Liyesh Mamash, from nothing to something. Because before that, it's just merely non-existent. Malchus is what materializes it to exist, bechlal, even in its most refined, subtle levels, so that there is an existence there as opposed to a non-existence. Now what is Malchus? Malchus itself is just the ray of the Shekhinah. She'eno el b'china zi va'ara ba'alma bilvad l'gab mahusa v'atzmusa yizbarach, which is only one little ray and mere shine alone of Hashem's essence. So I mean, it's hard to like say it over and over again, but we have to. That's what it means. You have to sit and meditate on it, because if you actually stop for a second and sort of go through each level, we're just sort of breezing by. But if you were going to take an elevator and stop at every floor, but instead of stopping at a floor, it stopped at like a universe, and you would get out and like spend years of your life in the universe, and say, wait, got to get back in the elevator and go up another level, and you did this for hundreds of years. You would realize the awesomeness of what's talking about. If you just go from the top to the bottom, you look out the window, you see universes go by, you don't appreciate what's really happening, how much is going on here. But he's saying even the source of all sources, that thing which enlivens all of this stuff from nothing to something, it's the life giver, that itself is a mere ray of Hashem's essence. Malchus of Atzilus. Malchus is the lowest sphere of Hashem himself. And that's why Malchus is likened to speech. Right? Because speech, even though speech is what enlivens basically your communication to the outside world, which means as far as the outside world is concerned, you are your speech, because that's what they're getting from you. That's how they have any perception of who you are. But that's to the outside world. But to the inside world, speech is nothing. And it's a mixture of water, fire, and air. But the idea here is that speech is, as far as you're concerned, essentially nothing. Why? Because anything you're going to say is either going to be some kind of intellect or emotion or some kind of expression that you already have within inside of you. And the way that it's inside of you, it's already complete. It's basically 100% vibrating at its ultimate essence. You know exactly what you're thinking. You know exactly what you're feeling. You know exactly what you want to express. The speech of it is a very external action of just letting someone else know what it is that you already have inside. You with me, Moshe? But try and follow the point here for a second. Yeah. Why do you say that? But does the speech itself is merely something which is a receiver? That fire, air, and water mixture, it's not something which generates thought, is it? It's not something which generates emotion. It's like a vessel, which that's my whole point. That's exactly my point. But that thing which you're going to express to somebody else, you know it already. And not only do you know it already, you know it much, much more thoroughly than the way it's going to come out of your mouth. In other words, if you could actually transfer your thoughts, let's say we don't have to speak right now. The whole complex thing which is going to take me moments to express my syllables and my words and it's time we're wasting. I already know exactly what I want to say. It's just like to construct it in this fire, air, water combination of coming out in breath is clumsy actually. I know exactly what I want to say. If I could just put my thought in your mind, we'd save ourselves a lot of time. The whole idea of speech coming out is that it's the lowest part of me. It's like taking everything I already have and know, putting it into like a compressed vessel so that I can give it to you. It's only relevant for you. I don't need it for myself. Right? So the idea is when it comes to the outside world, and we're talking about Hashem now, when it comes to the worlds, so speech is their very essence. Without the speech, they don't exist. Speech is the life force which enlivens all the worlds from top to bottom. So speech is like the top thing, number one. And that's what we call it Malchus. It's the top, it's the kingdom. But according to Hashem, on the contrary, speech is nothing. He doesn't even need it. He knows everything he already wants to say without even saying a word. It's the lowest of all levels. And that's what we're saying now, that basically the sphere of Malchus, even though when you climb up from one angel to the next angel, to the next angel, to the next angel, you get to the top. So where do you get to? You get to speech. At the end of the day, that speech is essentially nothing. Right? It's just a tiny ray. That's the point. But we're now meditating basically upon where all this stuff comes from, where this physicality comes from, and so forth. So when you start to realize that it has a source, and it has a source, and it has a source, and you realize, wow, the source is Hashem's speech, and then you realize that